Welcome back, everyone, to House General and Housing. And today is Wednesday, February 26th. And we're about to have a walkthrough of draft 4.1 of a committee housing bill. Cameron, want to introduce yourself and talk to us about this draft?
For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. My apologies for not being prepared to immediately go live with my laptop so we could walk through the latest version of your committee bill for housing. Give me one moment. We're going to be walking through draft 4.1.
Which we all have hard copies of.
Perfect. As you all remember, it is, does not have a House bill number at present because it is a committee bill. However, it does have drafting request number, which is DR 250838. Like I said, we're going to be walking through draft 4.1. And here we go. We're in business. Okay. So what you have, like I said, draft 4.1, what I've done is I've removed all the yellow highlights from the draft version that you all saw last week and yesterday. If you remember, we walked through draft 2.1 to the end of last week where I kind of talked through some of the changes that I had made in my sections. Yesterday, you walked through, I believe it's version 3.1, where Ellen came in and spoke to you all about her sections related to, appeals and energy efficiency, net metering, et cetera. So what we've done is we've now added a draft 4.1 where I've removed those yellow highlights. So everything in this draft that is yellow is new language or a tweak to language from what we've gone through. So I wanted to try to make that a little easy. So I'm going to be walking through, the chair asked that we just start top to bottom, and we're going to start walking through the entire bill. So I will stop and discuss the yellow changes that I've made, but I'm also going to be walking through each section again, just to kind of reorient the committee of where we're at in each section, et cetera. So first section, page 1, we're in the Vermont Rental Housing Improvement Program, VHIP. So as a reminder, the changes here are primarily proposed by the administration, and this was in their administration's housing bill that was introduced. There are a few tweaks that I have made at the request of the administration. One of them that I thought was important to include, which is what you see right here on page 1. So what we're doing is we're adding a subsection here. So as a reminder, the department has the money that is given to the VHIP program, and then they give that money out to nonprofit or affordable housing entities who then loan or grant those funds to landlords to do the work. And so what we're adding here on the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2, again, everything that is not yellow is already there that we've walked through. The administration is wanting to ensure that the entities that are carrying out the provisions of this section are exempt from Vermont's licensed lenders law, because these entities are lending money. If you remember in the VHIP program, they can do either grants or 5-year or 10-year loans. So they are loaning out money. So this is to exempt those entities from the requirements there. The request from the administration last Friday, after they came in and testified to you all, I believe it was on Friday, they wanted to specify that we're only talking about the work under this section. So if these entities are doing some sort of, lending in other capacities unrelated to the VHIP program, they may be required to comply with Vermont licensed lender law. I supported that change for clarity, so I did add it here.
Let me just ask you a question, or just to clarify, Chris, could you identify yourself, please?
Chris Donnelly, Champlain Housing Trust.
Are you one of these guys?
Catching up.
That is.
Yes.
You are. That is there's an example. I just want the committee to understand it. CHT is an example of an agent. Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so we are moving, and please, if anyone, Mr. Chair, if you have questions, your committee members have questions,
I
please
just
stop
wanna-
me, but I'm gonna keep
It's not
moving.
something to pity, but when you're done with it.
I'm gonna keep going, unless you all stop me for questions or comments. We're on page 2. We're starting with line 4 under the subsection D. So as a reminder, this is, currently the program can give up to $70,000 for rehabilitation or creation of an eligible rental housing unit to meet applicable building accessibility requirements under the Vermont Access rules. And we're changing this to say, removing that subsection and saying, keeping the 50,000 per unit. So if you're not getting up to the Vermont Access rules, you could get up to $50,000 for rehabilitation or creation of any other eligible rental housing unit. The proposal from the administration is remove that $70,000 cap and add up to an additional $20,000 for the underlying $50,000 grant or loan.
But that's not different than 3.1.
This has not been changed from what was originally proposed by the administration. There was some discussion among the committee about some concerns with this change. And I believe the administration came in and spoke to you all about that.
They testified that if someone just wanted to make an existing unit that was in good shape accessible, they could do that under the $50,000 grant. That it was not just limited to creation of new units.
I will defer to them. It is their program that they have been administering. I think you can equally read the language in the opposite.
Yeah, but that's what they testified. Yeah, right, okay.
So moving along, we're on the subsection E. So this is line 14, page 2. This is where, the key piece here is we're removing a 5-year forgivable loan. So as you all may remember, there are 3 ways the monies can be, just dispersed to the landlords. It's either a grant, a 5-year loan, or a 10-year loan. The proposal was to remove the 5-year loan. So then it would simply be grants or 10-year loans. And so this is removing the 5-year loan here.
Yeah. Well, they said they never done a loan for 5 years. That was their testimony. They just said it's been all grants. It's a conforming to what they've been doing. I think. Yeah, I think emphasizing the changes from 3.1 would be good.
Okay. Well, with that, we will somewhat speed along. Again, just everything here in the VHIP section is going to be the same as what you've seen in the past in regards to the 10-year loan and removing the requirements of who they lend to, who the landlords rent to, moving to a market rate as opposed to what's required there. The next change is going to be on page 5. This was based on the testimony that was provided to you all and my conversation with the administration, the Department of Housing and Community Development in particular, where they realized that this was a missed request from their that they proposed. If you remember up here under the grant section, it says if a grant, so my apologies for speeding through, going back to page 3 right here. This was in your last version where it's if you convert a grant to a forgivable loan, they will receive the prorated credit. They missed the edit down here on page 5, which is under the 10-year loan section to state that they will forgive the prorated amount of a forgivable loan each year. So it's just the corresponding change that was missed. So let's highlight.
I'm worried some very sharp member of the committee, I can't remember which of you sharp people it was, pointed out that it was unclear whether if it was 10 years, every year it was 10% loans, or it was 10% of the remaining balance, in which case there'd be a very tiny amount at the end unforgiven. This corrects that.
Yep.
A word on VHIP, just so you know where we're at, everybody. With those minor changes, there've been no changes in the draft so far on VHIP. The one area that's, I think, an important area is the striking that you see on page 4 and 5. what happened was, just reminding the committee and letting you know where we're at. What happened was, it used to be there was just a 5-year program. Then they added the 10-year program. The legislature, I think with input from the Health Human Services Committee, added in the homelessness requirement to the 10-year program. Is conceived by ACCD, is conceived by them, it didn't have that. In other words, they were creating a 5-year program where you had to take people exiting from homelessness, and a 10-year program where you had to have 10 years of HUD fair market rent for 10 years rather than 5, but you didn't have to take homelessness. The legislature added the homelessness back in. They, Alex Farrell and others testified for us, and I'm just reminding you that they didn't support that they thought that who would ever do the 10-year program if you still had the homelessness requirement. Advocates, I'm sure, from probably health services would say, well, we're getting increasing people who are homeless, so we got to do something. I asked Alex, and also so did our co-chair, could you come up with a compromise? Alex did. I asked him in session. Alex said, well, yeah, I think there are things we could do. We could have maybe 2 versions of the 10-year and give extra something if we went with you're taking homeless. And I said, okay, we'll make a proposal. He wrote me, I wrote him asking like, well, he wrote back saying, we have a proposal. And either he or Sean Gilpin are prepared to make it to us. And I suspect that will happen very quickly. I don't know what it is. I'm just letting you know where things stand. As far as I know, that's the only remaining issue that's new on VHIT. Yes.
I wasn't sure that we had that. I guess I was uncertain that we were doing a markup on this bill, so I haven't been able, or I have not that I haven't been able, I didn't realize I was able to say anything about the grant program, but I would like to voice objection to the grant program because I don't feel that it actually serves the people that, or the landlords that this program is supposed to serve. The grant program being a program where an owner, because it's a grant, a reimbursement grant and not a loan, the owner has to be able to gather the money, have often a matching grant, gather the money and then receive it and put the money into the right, and then they will receive a reimbursement. That is not the mom and pop people who, or landlords who are able, or owners who are able to do that are not for whom this program exists in my opinion.
So I'll tell you what, then that's why we will revisit this and think about what that means for language. If it means to take out so that it can be a lot further. Okay, but we will, yes.
Similarly, I'm having chats with the tax people again. I would be curious to know whether the grant is income, federal taxable. Like we had heard from Jason
Right,
fairly.
generally, yes, okay. That's
So,
why very often people or developers prefer loans. I don't know why they didn't do loans. We could just take that out.
I
I
think
mean, we could take the strikeout out.
in principle, from where I said, if we're going to spend Vermonters' money to help Vermont, DC can wait and keep their hands off it.
It's a question of whether they're a nonprofit or a nonprofit would always prefer a grant. Because they don't pay
Yeah,
taxes.
that's a different thing.
Just generally, yeah, generally a for-profit wants loans.
Right, but if they can't write off their expenses
Right.
against the grant.
Yeah.
It's not much.
Right. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Cameron. I think focusing on changes.
So we're done with the VHIP program as far as changes that I've made since the last draft that you all have seen. So on page 5 at the bottom, we're moving into, and the top of page 6, we're moving into the manufactured home improvement and repair program. And I'm just going to comment 2 things. There are no changes since the last version that you all saw, so I'm just going to comment on 2 things. There has, been a question about this program currently existing. I think I have mentioned it was created in session law. I went back and double checked, and the language is almost entirely identical. There's a slight change in subsection B2 here. So this is where the department may award funding to manufactured homeowners for which the home is their primary residence to address habitability and accessibility issues to bring the home into compliance with safe living conditions. That's just a slight language tweak from what actually passed, which forgive me, I am just switching very quickly just to show you. This is what was the current program. So it's for minor rehab and accessibility projects. And then it's where the home is otherwise in good condition, or in situations where the owner is unable to replace the home and the repair will keep them housed. So it's just a slight language change. Conceptually, there could be some difference there, but I'm just pointing it out to the committee. The remainder of the program appears to be copy and paste over from what existed in the session law temporary program. Why is this language here? If the program is going to become permanent, it needs to be in statute. It can't remain in session law, or at least that is not our practice. So that's why you're seeing it here. Why is the program that currently existed being recreated? It needs to be put in statute if it's going to be a permanent program with ongoing appropriations attached to it. Okay. So I have made no changes to that section. So then we get to page 7, the Vermont's Infrastructure Sustainability Fund. Similarly here, I've made no changes to this language. I will highlight that I did reach out regarding a question that I had. I'm just trying to grab it real quick. This is under the application criteria section. So this is subsection F on page 9. So this is the criteria by which, applications for these funds are going to be reviewed. One of the criteria is the ranking of the community on the Vermont Department of Finance and Management Community Index. I asked Department of Housing and the bank itself if that is, the correct articulation of that. They haven't got back to me yet with a formal thumbs up, thumbs down, but I'm just commenting that. Just kind of waiting on that. That was my only concern with the drafting of this language, and there have been no changes since you last reviewed it.
You know what the Vermont Community Index is?
I am probably not the best person to articulate what it is. I did look it up to make sure my wording of it was correct, but I would not be in a position to tell you what it is, what it's used for. Okay, so we are moving along. We are on page, I think we're going to move to page 10. This is the next big addition. And if you all remember last week, the committee was having discussion, I believe it was on Friday, about potential additional topics that you would all like to see in this next version. And we discussed at the authorization of Representative Burrows, draft bill that she was working on about Universal Design Study Committee. And so that's the language that you're going to see here, page 10, all the way through page 14. So I'm going to walk through this section with you because you haven't seen it yet before. So we have created the Residential Universal Design Study Committee to explore implementation of statewide universal design standards for all residential buildings. The sub B, we're going to move into the membership of the committee. We have 1 member of the House appointed by the Speaker, 1 member of the Senate appointed by the Committee on Committees. Moving to the top of page 11 here, We have a member appointed by the Vermont Builders and Remodelers Association, one by the Vermont chapter of the American Institute of Architects, the Director of Fire Safety or designee, one member of the Vermont Access Board, a member of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, a member of the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, a member appointed by Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont, one by Vermont Center for Independent Living, Vermont Developmental Disabilities Council, the Land Access and Opportunity Board, excuse me, the American Association of Retired Persons of Vermont, the Commissioner of the Department of Housing and Development. Moving to the top of page 12, we have a member of Neighbor Works of Western Vermont, a member of Vermont Mortgage Bankers Association, a member Vermont Bankers Association, the Association of Vermont Credit Unions, a member of Vermont Leagues and Cities and Towns, a member from Vermont Assessors and Listers Association, a member appointed by the Vermont Association of Realtors, and a member appointed by ADA Inspections Nationwide LLC.
How many people is that total?
22.
Oh, my.
I just had to go back and count her. I was like, oh, you start with the first person.
It's going to be very.
I'm not saying that we don't have to include all of these and further, the next thing, I think, maybe not, at the end, it says $200,000, which I think is way too much.
Yeah,
Oh, I thought we.
well, we did in our letter.
You
And
know,
I've sent our letter to you to conform. I think we should put down $10,000.
so.
Yeah.
We don't have to have all of them. I just,
Yeah.
the idea was when we were talking about it, that when deciding these things, it is a step towards everybody understanding the importance of universal design or ADA compliance. So the reason, for example, the reason that there are inspectors in there is so that inspectors can, or real estate people, so that they can understand that it actually adds value to a house and is not just a cost center for building. And so, I'm
saying inspectors or appraisers?
sorry,
Well,
appraisers.
Appraisers, right.
So again, I'm not married to a bunch of these, but I do think it's important to not just have it be stakeholders and not just have it be a process for picking, I mean, its purpose is to agree on standards for universal design and ADA compliant and or ADA compliance, but also so that all of these parties that are beyond immediate stakeholders can understand its importance.
Yes.
I think this is great. Can I put you on the spot and you can say no? If you were to like have your golden platter, of, like who you want, do you have an idea of who you, not who's more deserving of being on this, but like, do you have in your head who you think would be a better, like best matches for this type of board?
I do, but I think that it should be a committee discussion point.
Absolutely.
But I
This is
think
the full
people will
range,
be
and
looking, I think you are the person who has the most experience with this. And people will be looking to you for your opinion. And if you want to move this along, I think you need to be either saying, I'm happy with this list, or if it was me, I would include the following and then not include the following. And then people can react. But they have to have something to react to.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have at most 2 days to discuss this whole thing. So I don't mean this whole thing, the whole thing. We need to, so I think if you aren't happy with this list or you'd like to make it smaller, now's the time to tell us what you think. Not now.
Right now?
No, 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an observation. Nobody jumps straight to mind, but to have somebody on this study committee who is in the building trades, who can look at the recommendations and say, well, we can do it this way and it'll take us 18 hours, but if we move it over here, it'll take 4. Just because somebody who's boots on the ground will have an idea of how to do the cost efficiency kind of observation. Particularly the manufactured homes. folks who are all about the efficiency.
I will point out to, not to defend you, Representative Burrows, but to point out that in Representative Burrows' initial list, she did include, how best to have someone from the, private development space be on the committee, and in working with me at the end of the deadline, I wasn't able to best identify who would appoint that person. So.
It's the thing, it's the small,
Thank you.
Could we do like the Vermont Association of Contractors?
The contractors or somebody appointed by the governor.
Isn't that
what number 3 member? On top of
Vermont
11?
Builders and Remodelers Association. I was familiar with them, but it's a possibility. We'll find out more about who they are.
Okay,
That's how I read it.
let's go on.
Okay. So, to reorient us back, we're on page 12, line 15. We're moving into the powers and the duties of this committee. So they shall study the development and implementation of statewide universal design standards for residential buildings, including identification and analysis of the following issues.
can I just give a very quick background to this for people who weren't on this committee last meeting? We talked quite a bit about the fact that universal design and ADA compliance as subject matters were missing from some of the bills that had to do with housing, in part, and as it turned out, as I learned over the off session, was in part because we don't have defined standards, and some of those have, the ADA compliance has like 200 categories. So this study committee is kind of a step towards allowing us access to those subject matters really in the next session.
So we're going to be looking at, the committee will be looking at existing federal and state laws regarding Americans with Disabilities Act, standards and building codes. And that is just the reference to the Americans with Disability Act in the United States Code. We're on the top of page 13 here. So the committee will be looking at existing federal, state, and international best practices and standards addressing accessibility and adaptability characteristics of single-family and multi-tenant unit buildings. Opportunities and challenges for supporting residential buildings industry, supporting the residential building industry and meeting universal design standards, including considerations of workforce education and training, cost, benefits, and impacts of adopting a universal design standard for residential buildings, opportunities and challenges with enforcement of identified standards, and the impacts to the evaluation and financing of impacted buildings. That's what the committee would be charged with studying during this period. Okay.
This is the second question, and this is it evaluation or valuation? To evaluation, is that what it's supposed to say?
Are you referring to 6?
Yes.
I believe it is the valuation,
Valuation.
impacts to the value of the building.
Thank you.
Okay, so sub D, we have the committee shall have the administrative, technical, and legal assistance of the Office of Legislative Counsel and the Joint Fiscal Office. A point for committee discussion, I don't know to what extent we would be the best there, we being the office itself. But that is for open discussion here. Obviously, our office, the administrative, technical, and legal, we're here to support you all as our clients. And if you're on the committee, happy to support. If you would be looking for the expertise in this field as the committee is doing their work, I don't know that there would be anyone in our office who would be able to speak to some of these aspects that this study would be looking at. And that's why I'm talking about Burrows. There was that potential appropriations piece if the committee needed to bring on certain experts to advise the committee. So we're on line 15, the report. So the report would be due November 1st. It will be provided to this committee and the Senate Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs with findings and recommendations for action. In the sub F, we're moving into meetings. So we have the House of Representatives, the member of the House of Representatives shall call the first meeting to occur on or before June 1st. A few quick comments. You can make that. The committee here has options. You can say that the first meeting shall occur on X date and leave it at that, or you can allow a member who is appointed to be the one to call the first meeting and say on or before X date. So that can work a few different ways. I will also just highlight something I noticed as I was preparing for this morning. When we say that, the meeting shall occur on or before June 1st, I will need to fix the effective date of the act, because technically the effective date of the act is July 1st, 2025. So the committee wouldn't exist until then. So just my own highlight for you all, in case you become aware.
I think many of us in this room have been on study committees. It worked better, I think, well, for ours that Rep. Parsons and I are on, like, we didn't start until the fall because there was no date. And so the senior senator called it to order and it took a while. To keep that in mind for efficiency. That was straight for some. So if you have a target that you need to reach, then we felt very rushed. Because it took a while for the Senate to get it.
So was there a reason that you deferred to the Senate to?
I guess that was in some sort of
The language did.
language said senior senator, so Senator Westman had to call it to order. And it took some time and for a way, anyway, so that was just some feedback that's
Flooding.
right, that I would pass out there.
Yes,
Is there any mention of number of meetings?
I believe we have
Oh, here.
6, not more than 6.
Oh,
It is, we're getting there. It's on page 4.
oh, I see.
Okay, so the top of page 14, so we have an individual and in this draft version, it's the member of the House who's appointed. We'll call the first meeting again, as was mentioned by Rep. Kras. Now that can be someone else, doesn't have to be that individual. But when we get to 14, the committee shall select a chair from among its members at the first meeting. You can also specifically designate a chair if that is what you would like to do. And then a majority of the membership shall constitute a quorum. And then we have the committee shall cease to exist on December 1st. I did December 1st simply because the report is due on November 1st. And just knowing that, especially for, a lot of individuals who may be volunteering their time, sometimes that can be difficult to reach just given circumstances. So it does give a month in the event the report is a little late for the committee will cease to exist after that time in case it's needed to get together.
Yeah, because of that point, would it be better to just have the committee? Is it ready? The committee shall cease to exist after the final report.
You can, I don't know that there is an issue with it be drafted it that way.
I'm just thinking, I mean, obviously. A committee can go past November 1st just as easily as they could go past cease existing, I suppose. But in that case, you'd only be breaking one of these.
yeah. Usually, it's that when we get a report, if we have a question and we want to bring it back to the committee, it allows us to do that if it lasts a little longer. The report would come to us off session.
Yeah.
And so somebody on this committee would be in charge of looking at that and maybe want to ask the committee to meet one more time or something like that. Actually, if it was me, but I don't care very much, I would go on until I wouldn't have it go out of existence till February. So the committee as a whole could say to them, hey, get in here and testify. Why did you do this?
I like that.
Yeah.
So I think you could go either way. I think you can draft it to say the committee will cease to exist upon the submission of the final report. You could extend it out if you felt that it was important to do so. I don't know that you would have the committee obviously come in, but you may want some member of the committee, the chair of the committee, for example, to come in and testify on the work of the committee. In case you wanted the committee to meet duration for testimony.
Yeah.
So you have options there.
Okay.
I'm fine either way. I just was
It
curious.
is a good, no, that is a good, recommendation. I'll keep that in my pocket next time.
So I like the suggestion of extending, because I think that's something that gets missed in studies, is the reports get submitted and then there's no room and opportunity for dialogue with the committees subsequently. And I mean, I don't know if that even makes sense, if that is in the work, if that's within the jurisdiction.
Well, it doesn't cost anything, because if they don't meet, it doesn't cost. anything.
Right,
Right.
so, yeah, then if it doesn't cost anything, then.
So change line 4 to say February instead of December?
Well, we could, but I think,
Yeah, just leave it.
yeah, for now, let's just leave it and we'll revisit this, okay, quickly. All right, well, but we can have faith in midnight on Friday, but, okay, we could,
Okay.
okay.
So we are on page 14. So we're to compensation and reimbursement. So, what we have here is for attendance at the meetings, a legislative member shall be entitled to it, serving in the member's capacity of the legislator shall be entitled to a per diem compensation and reimbursement for not more than 6 meetings. Representative Dodge, that's why I said 6 meetings. It doesn't, there is no separate line item that says you shall only meet this number of times. So conceptually, the committee could meet more than 6 times. It just, this language is going to limit the reimbursement for the legislative members to 6 meetings. So if they met more than that, then it would, the legislative member would not be eligible for reimbursement. So what you could do is if you all felt that there needed to be a cap on the number of meetings, we could add a separate line item that says the committee shall not meet more than X number of times.
So the legislative members get whatever the per diem set for up to 6 meetings. What about the rest of the committee? That's where the rest of the appropriation, or is it meant to be like a,
Yeah, that's the way it usually works. We get that all the time, we got that all the time.
okay,
What you did is the legislators get per diem, comes out of some fund that's existing, and then money's appropriated for everybody else. And in this case, it says 200,000, it should say 10.
okay.
That would be sub H, the sum of 200,000 appropriate from general fund in fiscal year 26 or per diem compensation and reimbursement of expenses from members of the committee and to engage the services of one or more experts as necessary. You may want to specify, and I'll leave this for the committee here. What I have seen in other areas is with reimbursements for members of the committee who aren't already paid for their time associated with that work.
Yeah.
So I've seen both, right? Like if there are, as the members list is currently compiled, there's members of state government, for
Yeah.
example. The commissioner of DHCD is going to get paid for the time associated with the work of the committee. So that individual shouldn't get reimbursed from any monies. But I have also seen, I think there was, this happened in the landlord tenant committee. There were individuals who were taking time off work.
Right.
Yeah, we had,
Committee, and I
right,
don't
two
know if they were
people.
being reimbursed for that,
So it
so.
would be members of the committee who are not otherwise compensated.
And they got like
Be adding something like that, yes,
I
sir.
think that's a good idea.
expenses.
That's why don't we just do that? Okay. Joe?
Apologies for my absence. The 22 member board part.
Yeah.
Was that discussed?
What she's gonna do, Elizabeth is gonna come up with a list of, if she wanted it smaller, who would it be? I told her that we of course could discuss it and change her list, but we gotta start somewhere.
You do have.
I mean, we are starting somewhere at 22.
Okay, we have 15 minutes, so we want to,
I thought we were going to.
oh, no, we're going to
Oh, yeah.
noon, that's right, yeah.
We're so used to that pace of.
Watch now, okay.
I have to say for as long as you want, all the way up until 2 o'clock when I am expected elsewhere. Okay. So we're moving, we are on the bottom of page 15, moving to the top of page 15. This is the tax department housing data access. I have not made any changes to this section, so we'll keep moving along.
Can I just get a clarification on that? This is basically a carte blanche forever. You can ask whatever you want from the Camden information. It says an extract, that could be any.
Yes,
I think you are correct.
and we heard testimony that this is public information.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
putting it out there that that's what this language does, is it allows them to ask accounts for
right,
whatever they want.
yeah.
Are you suggesting that we curb it?
Well, I don't know if we need to, I'm just making the point that that's what that does. I mean, they could ask for some angry accounts of everything, I don't know. I
Yeah.
just, it's an odd, for me, it's an odd way of doing it. I mean, they want certain information, but I'm not. Not a sticky thing.
I will dig into it here as well. Okay. Moving to the next change, we're passing through the sales and use tax exemption, which still remains empty at this point, section 6 there on page 15. I'll highlight that we did receive some language. If you recall last week, it was a conversation of having a member of our office, legislative council, kind of talk with my housing finance agency and others about potentially trying to come up with a definition, I believe, of affordable housing, if I recall correctly, to try to limit the exemption here that would potentially go into the bill for discussion. We received some language yesterday and kind of reviewing it and discussing.
The next thing that we're looking at is the definition of first-time home buyer.
Sorry, I paused here
Oh,
to
okay,
mention why this is still empty. So,
okay,
yeah.
it's just, we're waiting.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Yes, sir. Okay, so yes, now moving to page 16, we are in the section related to tax credits under the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. And so this is for the first generation home buyer program and the down payment assistance program. And so there was a request from the Vermont Housing Finance Agency to define first generation home buyer. And it's simply that, similar to the manufactured home improvement repair program, these programs exist. They've just been done in session law previously. So we're bringing them into statute here to make them somewhat permanent or to extend them for multiple years in one instance. And so this definition was in session law to specify what is a first generation home buyer. And so the request was to add that in as well. So we're keeping the program consistent as we're moving it over. And that is the exact language that was in session law, but just to run through it very quickly. First generation home buyer is a home buyer who self-attests that the home buyer is an individual whose parents or legal guardians do not have, and during the home buyer's lifetime have not had any residential ownership in any state or lost ownership of a home due to foreclosure, short sale, or deed in lieu of foreclosure and have not owned a home since that loss, or who has at any time been placed in foster care. So that definition, again, is similar to what currently exists for the program. It's just being added over.
Does the committee remember the difference in session law?
Yeah.
And ordinance?
Statute.
Yeah, session law, when a bill doesn't specify that something, that a section of the ordinance should be amended, the legislature can pass things that become law in Act X, but they don't belong anywhere in the code because it's not put in the code. Generally, those kinds of things are when you really just want to do it once. You don't want to memorialize it in the code.
You have some session law later on in this bill. So, okay. Moving along, so I haven't made any other changes to this section, so, here, we're on page 16. Line 12, moving forward, so this subsection G, we have the credit allocation for these two programs that we've discussed. So $250,000 here for the first-time home buyers for, who are also first-generation home buyers. And then moving forward to the page 18, we have fiscal year 27 to 31 allocation of 250,000 for down payment assistance program.
I guess what I'd ask you to do is double check. My memory, which could easily be wrong, is that the testimony, that Maura Collins' testimony was that if we limited it through 31, that we could maintain the current loan program for first-time home buyers. If we wanted an additional $10,000 grant for forced generational home buyers, we would have to keep the 250,000 without termination.
I believe, and you have a member from the HFA in the room who may be able to confirm, the fact that both programs are here covers what the HFA was.
What, you want to give your name for the record
Sure.
and tell us?
Chad Simmons with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. So yes, as Ledge Council, from the various nations, these two programs are in line with what Maura has testified to, so that the down payment assistance program, we're asking for an extension of an existing program through the tax credit. So that would, as you said, Chair, that would allow us to continue providing up to $10,000 grants for first-time home buyers through a down payment assistance loan that they would then repay when either refining the home or selling. The first generation grant is a grant program that we are proposing to add to the state tax credit. And that would, as we're proposing it, that would go on for.
So then 3, if you look at the language in 3, where are you? I'm on page 18.
Yep, the very top.
That's not consistent with going with then that, is that inconsistent with the first generation home buyer grant?
So the first generation grant, the language, as Cameron had walked through, there's 2 sections, so there are 2 programs.
Okay, and so
What was at the top of page 18 is the time period in which we're proposing we would continue selling state tax credits for the purpose of the down payment assistance program.
right,
And we are saying that is okay to sunset in 2031.
and where is the other? Is it C on page 17? In other words,
Yep.
is that the one that allows for the grant?
For the.
Okay, so it's all okay, great, all right, we got it.
So I made no other changes to that section other than adding that definition that we talked about. So we're gonna move to page 18. Next section we're gonna talk about is the land bank report. So I have made some changes here. The first change that I made, and Mr. Chair, I believe this is what your expectation was, is that the report be submitted on November 1st. The last draft had it at November 15th. And I believe there was a communication you sent asking for it to be on the 1st of the month. So I've just made that change. Happy to go back, adding a number 5. So if you all would like. But
Everybody, I just was doing that. Last year, I managed to get through into law a bill that created a dam safety study committee. And it was supposed to start whenever and end whenever, and it did. It just didn't. They just didn't get to it, didn't have the resources. And I just figured that an earlier date is more, is better. And partly because, as I've said before to you, I'd actually like it to come in time so that somebody could look at it and they could feedback to the committee, refine it, and maybe get law together in December to Ledge Council, because you know how our Ledge Council have been backed up through no fault of their own because we didn't exist until early January. So consequently, they really couldn't be doing much work. We do exist now. Even when we're off session in the summer, you're still legislator. We're all still legislators. And we may not be in session, but we exist as legislators. And so you could be working on bills with Ledge Council all summer long. So Ledge Council has a deadline for submittal of bills. Remember, this year it was the end of February. No, the end of January was the deadline. Next year, for next session, it will be December 1.
In this, there was some discussion about the last iteration of this was more focused on having the legislative language create a state land bank. And there was conversation about whether that would effectively serve certain regions and municipalities and whether or not it should be regional. And so what I tried to do was take that feedback and require the department to come back with different options here. So what I've changed is everything in yellow, and it's the report shall include proposed legislative language for the creation of a state land bank, the authorization of regional and municipal land banks, funding proposals related to both, and then require them to do an analysis of which option of those two best serves the interest of Vermont communities, including rural communities. If I have not articulated what you all were asking for, please let me know and we can tweak this further.
Comments?
Good, I like it.
Okay.
That is the end of the policy section that I manage. So as you can see, it moves into the appeals section, which my understanding has not been changed from what you looked at yesterday. So I'm going to be skipping forward to the next inclusion, which I will also not go over, but I will point it out to you, which is going to be on page 27. Where we have inserted the language related to brownfields. Now, I'm not going to walk through this section because someone else in our office covers, which would be Michael O'Grady. If you have questions and you would like to reach out to him in anticipation of him walking through, which I think will occur on Thursday. My understanding is this language was provided from, the administration, or at least it was a starting point from work that came over from A&R. Our office, Michael O'Grady in particular, worked with them on making sure the language worked. And so this was what they had agreed to. I've inserted it here and highlighted it so you're aware that it is in the draft. But again, I'm not going to walk through this with you at this time. Mr. O'Grady will be here later this week to talk to you.
I think if you pass on, there were two, this is pretty lengthy, but the two issues. Let me just look here for a second. Right, there's something missing from this.
Of the brownfield?
Yes, what happened was, Ashley and I and Allison Clarkson, Senator Clarkson and Senator Randy Brock met with the Secretary of A&R and with Matt Chapman, the head of the division that deals with contaminated property. I've forgotten the name of the division. And we basically said, what can we do to substantially reduce the amount of time and effort that it takes to go through the brownfields process? Because we heard from developers that this is a real burden when you're dealing with brownfields, that it takes as long as a year to get a corrective action plan, much less go through the whole thing. So they had two suggestions. One suggestion is here, which is essentially creating or giving us a report where they said, we will study ways to really shorten that program. And that's here. And this language was developed by them in response to the meeting that we had. The other was to give, unless I'm missing it somewhere, that they would give preference to, is that in here? That they would give preference to cleanups involving housing development. I don't think it's in here. But I remember seeing it somewhere. I thought it was in Matt's.
1 and 29, 1. I would say potentially, yes, it's on page 29. top of the
As a
sheet.
review,
29.
the first line. Page 29. Of conducting any review.
Yeah, okay, great, it's there. Take it back. Okay, great. But just so you all know, that's where this comes from.
See, Ian,
So the language is really their language, but it was in response to our request. It was a good meeting. From what my tribe, they were actually quite forthcoming.
I am going to move you to page 30, section 20, which starts on line 14. So, this would be in session law because it is a one-time report, as we talked earlier. If you recall, in the previous draft, we had 250,000 going through DHCD to Vermont Housing Finance Agency to work on the recommendations of this report. My understanding is the testimony that was provided to you all as this report came out in January. There were recommendations about what can be done to move the thoughts of that report forward. And VHFA had come in and said, with $250,000, we can, get the additional resources needed to be able to move those recommendations forward. And so that language was in the previous version that you all have received, I believe since draft 1.1, I could be wrong, but it was in 2.1 that we walked through. All that we've done here, excuse me, all that we've done here is going to be on page 31, where we've kind of highlighted the recommendations from that report to make it more clear what VHFA needs to be looking at in relation to those recommendations and what they need to come back to you all with in the report that's going to be submitted. I believe there's two reports. There's an interim report in January of 2026 and a final report in December of 2026. So while all this language is new, what we've pretty much done is we've just specified that these are the recommendations from that report that VHFA needs to be further investigating and coming back to you all with information as it relates to each of these points. So again, they're going to get $250,000 to further develop recommendations from this report, and VHFA shall, and I'm going to walk through them quickly, and just in case anyone hasn't seen that report.
Where did this language come?
These are the recommendations that were in that report. Yes. And so for anybody who hasn't seen that report, what the $250,000 is going to support is VHFA further identifying and recommending a set of state policy objectives and priorities related to offsite housing construction, explore opportunities for using bulk purchasing of single and multifamily houses produced through offsite construction, gather input from potential manufacturers about how to best achieve cost savings through bulk purchase program, determine any business planning support needed for existing Vermont businesses seeking to develop or expand offsite, and apologies there, that's a typo that we will fix. Explore creating a working group of neighboring states that consider a regional market and shared approach, and estimate the funding and structure needed to support greater development of offsite homes.
I guess I would ask, my reaction to this is just too extended, it's too long. I'd ask, Ted, are you familiar with this?
Yes.
What if we were to put, instead of estimate the funding and structure, it would be to provide to the legislature the funding and structure. And we made the preliminary report due on November 1, 2025. And the final report, I personally would make the final report due on November 2025, but I mean, how long is this really gonna take?
Again, Chad Simmons, Vermont Housing Finance Agency. So we would partner with a number of entities, including Department of Housing and Community Development, Vermont Economic Development Authority, and try to, as well as our neighbors, across state lines, to figure out essentially the economics and how this would be structured in a way that would meet the state's needs. To do that is gonna take a little bit of time, and if this, just thinking logistically, as Rep. Krasnow kind of walked through, by the time this bill passes and goes into effect, it would be July 1st. We get into the contracting with Department of Housing and Community Development. So we would be starting at the very earliest late summer of 2025. So we, as Laura testified, we don't feel confident that we would be able to come back to you in a couple of short months with really clear policy goals, and then how the state could bring those bring those policy goals to fruition. So we actually did propose these timelines. One, the report back could be used as a jumping off point for policy in the next legislative session. But we would feel more confident having an extended timeline for the initial reports, as opposed to coming back to you all 11 months from now and asking for an extension.
Okay, I hear you. Personally, I'd feel happier if Six said propose, not estimate. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, we would be.
Could we make that change at least? I think 5 really smart people sitting in a room could do it in a day, but that's my opinion.
Question.
Please.
I mean, my impression from the testimony we got from the constructors, the builders themselves, was that this shortens the speed at which you can build, and it's not necessarily a huge cost savings in the materials, but are we saying that the cost savings lie in the labor? Is that, yeah, Tom's like, I have your answer.
The biggest cost saving is in the bulk purchasing, in the bulk manufacturing, so making building 20 the same thing is much more costly. So that's one of that's line 6 addresses that. The offsite housing can be done faster because you could be building all winter long indoors. So there is the speed.
Faster but not cheaper unless you purchase a lot.
Well, my impression was the folks that did the Middlebury, like that was what,
They purchased-
80 something units?
Yeah, they did.
I mean,
purchase in bulk.
still, I feel like the testimony wasn't that it was any cheaper because,
I think that what Maura testified, or I don't remember whether it was Maura or who else testified?
Nate.
Nate.
Yeah, that would be.
Testified. My memory is what they said, first of all, that in terms of speed, and maybe there would be savings if you had bulk purchases. But that what you'd want to do, remember the testimony we got on Homes for All, where Chris Cochran testified and showed us pictures of vernacular houses, that is, houses that
oh,
were developed. I think the feeling is there would have to be, what Maura or Nate testified to is what their goal would be is to develop amongst those a very few, like 2, that were going to be tried out. And they would actually be tested for consumer acceptance, et cetera. So then you could order like 50 or 100 or even 200 of one kind of house. If you could find developers or nonprofits who would.
Some of the,
Wonder,
some of
yeah.
this, some of the savings is in long-term efficiency. Like the foam panels, the laminates are. It's a long-term return on cost.
Yeah, I am not against doing this at
Yeah.
all. I'm just,
Question?
I feel like we got the testimony and I feel like putting $250,000 into researching it for massive extension. Like, it just seems like a lot for getting at answers that seem very intuitive.
Well,
So what am I
incentive-
missing?
Yeah, well, you heard me. I'm impatient
I
myself.
would agree with
But-
November 1,
Yeah,
because we need the houses sooner
Yeah,
than 10 years. from
what
now.
I think. Remember there was an exchange with Maura. I asked her, so what do you need? You know, we had up on the screen all the recommendations of the committee about what had to happen next. There were like 10 of them. I said, what do you need from us now? And she said, we can do all that stuff, or most of it ourselves. What we need is a body. We need somebody who can honcho this process. The 250,000 is to pay for the FTE and to have consulting money and money to head up to pay for the study. That's what it is. But I think the sense of the committee, I hope, is that we don't want another report. We want draft legislation. Chad, is that acceptable?
Again, Chad Simmons, I think, we very much hear what the members are saying and the desire to move quickly, as we do as well. I think, to the first point, that Cameron went over, the first goal is gonna be to understand what the policy goals and proposed policy goals. So, if the policy goals is to just find the cheapest way to develop housing, that's a very different policy goal than if we want to have an in-state off-site manufactured facility. That's a whole other suite of policy goals and would then require different policy proposals and appropriations. So I think that would be why we need a little extra time to kind of work through what that would look like. So does that make sense?
I understand that's an issue. I can't imagine that you would do anything but vote. That is, how much would it cost to do this? And how much would it cost to do that? And then the legislature would have to make up its mind, right?
Yes.
And I think, yeah, okay, but we know you're not gonna say, oh, well, we're not, you might end up in a recommendation saying it doesn't make sense to do it in state. You might financially, but I suspect you'd have to study both.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, so Deputy Commissioner also talked about the grants for technical assistance that the state has provided. That we won't actually see the outcomes of those efforts to see if the plausibility of having in-state developed offsite manufactured housing until the end of this year. So we wouldn't be able to come prepared with, here is what we learned from that process before the end of the year. So and I can't recall exactly when that report is done, but it's after the November date, which is why we suggested the states.
Okay. So you might have 2 or 3 weeks to respond to it and get us an interim report in January.
Correct.
Of 2026. So, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just like, is it an option to just write language that says look into it, look into prioritizing Vermont builders or Vermont sourced materials when financially feasible. I mean,
I think that's how they understand Warren. In other words, do you remember from the testimony before, Maura actually said out loud, one of the things we have to decide is whether our goal is to produce it, the most housing, the cheapest we possibly can, or
support
Is our
local
goal-
growth.
and homegrown. And I think what they're talking about here is putting some numbers to those options and giving us the material we need, because that's a legislative. She's throwing that in our lap, and I think she's right.
Yeah.
Yes, Joe.
I'm not a huge fan of this section myself. I genuinely, from a few years being here, see a report being created from another report that's gonna repackage a lot of, probably 70% of this information that we already know. It's gonna throw some numbers on it that are gonna be very educated guesses. And we're gonna circle right back around to, do we have the workforce to start that facility? And if they do show up, where are they gonna live? Because we don't have the housing. This one just seems real circular to me. I understand wanting to do something, but is it gonna be a lot cheaper to start up a facility in the state and then build the houses? Or purchase them from a facility that's already running and has capacity?
That I think is.
Well, if you're saving $20,000 by building them in Vermont and you're getting some jobs out of it, things like that, but you need to dump $40 million into this program for that to be feasible. It's gonna, at $20,000 a home, that's gonna take a while. I just feel like there's a lot of information that we already know that we don't act upon already. That's gonna be repackaged to us.
Is there not enough information in the original report to actually have legislative language? Do we need to do, what does this include that the previous report didn't?
These are actually in the previous report. This is what the previous report states. But this is a summary of
Their recommendations.
recommendations that be studied. But that's why, okay, there's two different issues to respond to you, Joe. One is it really worth it to do an in-state facility? And I think that the study should tell us that. And if the numbers are like you say, well, then, the legislature conclude that it doesn't. There's a representative from the town of, I guess it would be, who is it? Who is,
Canfield?
what?
Canfield?
Yes. Who's very much wants to make that happen. And if we're gonna say no, we have to have numbers. to Back it up, in my view. Okay. But the rest of what you said is, are we still just stirring the pot endlessly here? I sympathize with that. And that's why I want 6 to be real clear. We want legislation. And I really would like it in time to do something next year. Because otherwise, at least I'm quite sympathetic with where Joe stands. And I'd like the agency to know that we're going to be knocking on your door, with that interim report, and basically saying what you got. It's entirely, so that's just my opinion, anybody.
Yeah, I just see that 250 FTE is like, how much of that is one full-time person, and then you need another $150,000 to report on
Do
it?
you know what
I don't-
the money is, Jen?
The money would be for a variety of things, including that FTE, but I think as it was proposed by the co-author of the report, is it would take, as well as the Department of Housing and Community Development, it would take a little while to scope out what the full scope of this project would look like, and then figure out who we would need to hire to bring in and learn a little bit more about what this would look like in Vermont. So again, I think, one of the questions needing to be answered is, are we as a state going to create a market for offsite manufacturing, which is a fairly big question. A state that has a lot of housing needs, but might not be at the scale that would be required to, as Huntington Homes has testified to, they've kind of maxed out at what they would like to see in terms of their business growth. So the state would need to have some information around how to do that.
I thought Huntington Home said they could double their output.
Yeah,
They have to
they-
work.
Or they don't work for
A
it.
new
Yeah,
workforce.
workforce, and I think so those are some questions that the state would.
And what are our options, Chair, for this piece, like? Keep it in as is, remove,
Well, I would tighten it up myself. And what I would do, what I would see, I mean, you know, I don't know if it would satisfy Joe or others who are shaking their heads about this. But I would say, first of all, under 2, explore, I hate words like that. I would say, you know, determine the structure and relevant actors for using bulk packaging. You know, determine. We've just scratched our chins long enough. I mean, it's time to put a program together. So determine the structure and relevant actors for using bulk purchases. And then on 6, I would put prepare the funding and or propose the specific funding and structure necessary to, you know,
so we're kind of directing them in statute
yeah,
instead
do
of
this.
leaving it.
right. And
Okay.
I'm sympathetic about the problems that they have in terms of getting somebody hired in time. So I think an interim report of January 15th, I would add, which would include responses to item 6 by January 15th, and then a final on December. I really want to accept, I just feel like whoever said we need the housing is right. That's my take on this. Does that help in any way?
No, I mean, it's, yeah,
Just to comment, I mean, we need the housing yesterday. Okay. The minute we decide that we're gonna build it, the contractors are not gonna have it to us the next month.
Right.
Okay, so, and I'm gonna, if the Robinsons showed up, I'm gonna start getting phone calls any moment. Can you build me this? Can you build me that? And they're thinking this year. Right, and I have to tell
All
them.
right, we've got
no,
you, you know.
Okay, right, okay, and if we want to have homes, X number of homes in place by a certain date, the contractors have to have a couple years, really in that volume, a couple years heads up. They have to have enough heads up to expand the workforce, expand their facility. It's going to be a both. We're going to have to bring units in from outside the state. We're going to have to build, we're going to have to solve it 50 different ways. It'll be on-site buildings, it'll be manufactured homes, it will be stuff from out of state. The only way we're going to meet that number. So because there's all of this lead time required to actually build this stuff, the sooner we get these things ironed out, and because it's a priority, I would really lean on sooner instead of later.
Can I just ask a question? Joe, when you were mentioning all of this, like based off of information we already have and all of these things, and is it the $250,000 that has any factor in attesting to this portion? Because I was leaning at that myself with trying to figure out what the numbers are gonna be. And I know that it covers a lot of other things, but that lacks a little bit of clarity. And that's in my opinion, it's a big price tag for a short amount of time with not a lot of clarity around the roles and responsibilities and what we're gonna get in return on investment from that.
mine was a the holistic thing of spending that. We do the like, that's not, in the scheme of the budget, that's a drop, right? It's a lot of friggin' money.
That's what I'm saying.
There's a lot.
That's what I'm saying.
And I just see it as like, there are like a couple pieces in there, like for sure that'd be helpful to like have somebody in their realm to
Yeah.
say, be like, no, it does not work for us to do that.
Right,
We studied it, no.
right.
You can have your own opinions. From our world, no, or yeah, or yes. But yeah, it's just the whole thing of, I like the idea of tightening it up and like, give us answers. I don't care if we don't like them.
What I would, you hearing this?
Yes.
Okay. What I would request, yeah, I would request that you come here and we'll just whip you with the wet noodles. or whatever. No, I would request that ASAP, like 5 o'clock, no, like tomorrow morning. Could you break down the 250 and also think what's the minimum that you could work with, okay? Great,
Yeah, that, I like, thank you.
okay,
And I just want to say that this, like, my questions and my rush to do this also just reflect my trust, full trust in, like the policy making, we're all heading in the direction of trying to house people, but, so this isn't like, I don't want to give money to a really important resource in our state. This is a reflection of, I trust you guys, like, I want you to just get it moving forward. That's all I'm trying to tighten up.
And also just to put a cap on that or put it in perspective, it's the same amount of money that Home Share was just asking for their expansion across the whole state. So to put those things side by side is hard. The same amounts of money.
Sure, if I could
Appropriation.
Yeah.
just add one thing, parroting Maura here a little bit, in that last year we heard loud and clear that the legislature would look to explore this way of building housing. And I can't emphasize enough that this is looking at how we build housing very differently than what we have in the last 40, 50 years. It's a really different way as a country, essentially, kind of thinking about how we develop housing. And so we kind of went and did this preliminary research and study kind of on our own. We pulled some partners together. We did not need funding to do it last year. But what that report told us is because this is such a different way of doing housing, we need a little extra time to figure out how we're going to get it right. What I would put back to, and we very much hear loud and clear that we need housing now. I think this afternoon, you're going to be going through and prioritizing the appropriations and the requests from many of us sitting in the benches here. I would just say, I think you have a lot of options on building housing right now. I think DHCB's request is the clearest date for them saying, here's our pipeline that we can build right now. I would point to those opportunities to fund housing right now. And knowing that this study will kind of allow us to look at tools that we may be able to access in the coming years.
thank you.
Thank you. Good answer.
Yeah, that was good.
Okay, yeah, I think we are ready to move on. Oh,
Just one question, and I don't know who to ask the question to, but would this study include the model blueprints or?
no. It would include. We don't know. I don't think it would, am I right? It wouldn't go so far as to pick the vernacular design, develop the blueprints for a
But that's what
bulk purchase.
but that's what I guess what I was gonna ask is there any kind of collaboration with the HCD on what they're working on? So that those two things could actually work together.
Absolutely, and that's why they're a partner in this process.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
to Rep. Parkinson's point, I think too, just understanding then what are the workforce needs that would be required to then build some of these homes in that way that, you know, a lot of time and effort went into developing that toolkit. And as the agent, as DHCD mentioned, there are a few needs for the state to be able to get that off the ground.
Excuse me. Does that need to be more explicit in this bill?
Of course.
The DHCD's role in the first, the toolkit, but then the part two of the toolkit, which includes the
I think number two might, I mean, I would hope that number two would kind of point them in that direction as to things they explore.
explore opportunities. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, just number two, like because that's a bulk part, that's a
Both branches, you're gonna have to have.
It should be, but as you know,
it shouldn't, yeah.
it should be, but as you know, sometimes unless it's actually specifically demarcated in the law, it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily get done. Not that I don't trust you
I
guys to do it, but
propose that,
you know,
let's determine structure and relevant actors necessary to use bulk purchasing. That was what I had proposed. Do you want to be more specific? If we're spending the time talking about this, we may as well give in drafting directions.
May I?
Yeah,
My understanding, and I could be totally wrong, because I will continue to emphasize I'm new in this space. My understanding is the work of DHCD was more, how do we have these designs that are able to be utilized in these areas for infill, and then how do we then take those and make sure that the regulatory process of getting them approved and put in place.
that's how it goes for all.
that is,
So as to get them
yes.
in place quickly. And then are you asking if, how do we coordinate that with, if you're going to do
Yes.
that, then that connects to the bulk purchasing work that is
Yes.
being examined over here.
that's what I'm asking, is that those be knit together so that we have that information if we want to.
You could, I would say, this may be a way of accomplishing that task is under number two, and if I rewrite it slightly as you know, the chair is asking here to say that part of that work shall be in collaboration with the work that DHCD is doing,
And it's homes for all.
referencing that work.
Do you understand what I'm
I know
saying?
exactly what you mean. I think that's great.
So,
Just one of the things, just so the committee understands, we're about to move into appropriations. As a general matter, I have forwarded to Cameron our priority list, our letter to appropriations. The reason I did that is it is the most recent document that we've generated that has all of our appropriations in it. And I think probably what's gonna happen is Cameron's gonna have to come back with a sort of final version of this.
I'm sure I will need to cross-reference that you shared with me this morning and make sure it's here. One thing I just, real quick before I move on, and then the appropriation section, I think it can be relatively quick in the sense of identifying what I've added. On this piece in particular, this study as it is here, what I have is changing number 2 and 6. 2, as we discussed, determining the structure and the relevant actors, adding this cross-reference to coordinate with DHCD on the work that they're doing. Number 6, changing estimate to propose specific funding and structure. Those are the two things that I have as far as what I need to change in the draft. I know there was a little bit of discussion, Mr. Chair, about the time frame, and I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything there. Are you okay with that
Well,
timeframe that's
I'm
here?
okay with it, but they're asserting that I have no choice.
Okay, I'm leaving it here for now, and they will be getting back to you at some point soon, they being VHFA with comments as to the
I think
questions.
June 30th.
Go from there, before the bill takes effect, right?
July 1. I mean, they could be working now, for God's sake.
So, understood, that's what I have.
All right,
So bring us back, we're gonna move on, as the chair mentioned, we're moving into the top of page 32 into the appropriations section. And so, one thing that you discussed last week and you heard from Department of Housing Community Development about the position requests that they have. And so it was mentioned to the committee to ask me to pull that information over from the administration's proposal. So what this section in particular is just related to the funding needed for these positions for DHCD. So they have asked for 3
But this
new. This is the,
DHCD, okay. Sound DHCD and BHCB.
BHCB,
sound a
yeah.
lot. Yeah.
so what you have here in the sub A are they are requesting 3 new classified positions and the sum of 450,000 in fiscal year 26 for those positions. I will defer to you, excuse me, I will defer to them on what those positions specifically are. I have seen language and statute articulate exactly what the positions are. You know, one shall be an administrative assistant A, and one shall be a program tech 2, et cetera. That's not here, so they would be able to then presumably ask for an RFR those positions into what is needed. But just what I will point out is you are creating 3 new positions to give to them with the funding associated there. What they're going to use them for, so Rep. President, 1 second, what they're going to use them for is, I defer to them. So, sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, before I have to head out, that, I do really appreciate the work that they do. And I often task them with a lot of stuff. And it is a strain, and so I respect their needs and these requests for the agency, because they are doing really good work and are a big operation over there. So I trust that their asks are valid, and I'm grateful for the work that they've done for us in here, for various things that we task them with without appropriation that costs money in another way by having more staff and other things. So that's kind of my take on that.
What I think this is, and I guess we need to verify, I don't think we need to be too specific, but let me be. The budget, the administration's proposal that came to us was that for the manufactured home improvement and repair program in VHFA, 2 million plus 1 FTE. That's what they proposed. They proposed, and it's in the budget. They proposed that their where is the other 1 FTE? Homes for All. The 300, they proposed 300,000 for 2 FTE.
So that is,
That's
what's in the sub B. These are the 2, remember they were here testifying, they wanted funding to extend 2 of their limited service
That's right.
positions. Mhm.
And the what I don't know is what are the other 2 full-time positions?
I can double check and go back to the language that was presented to you all from the administration. I don't recall it being specific there either when I pulled it over. This is exactly how I took their language and drafted it into.
Yeah, I understand.
And was introduced as their.
I just don't know what it is, and I think we gotta figure it out, because I think the sooner, I'm a little worried that our priority list doesn't have. We have 2 Homes for All, 2, and manufactured. It may be in the. Wait. It may be in the rental revolving loan fund and middle, the 15 and 15 may have had FTEs in them. I just don't. VHIP. Would you just double check? I think it's VIA. I think I have VIA funding plus 2 FTE.
I will send them a quick email, CC you on it and see if they can.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so those are the 5 positions that they have requested. Again, 3 new, the 2 extension of the limited service, my understanding to the chair's point, that was, work that they have in the Homes for All, et cetera. It's a little more descriptive about what those positions are for. 1 is technical assistance, 1 is coordinating funding, and data. So then we get into the next appropriation section. So the first thing here, this is the bottom of page 32, the sub 1. So
That's the big funding to
Yep,
VHCB.
40 million to VHCB.
That number may change after we've had a committee discussion. In my letter, I put 25 million in my letter, always. Okay,
So, and the language here is language, similar language that has been used in the past. I will highlight it as,
in other words,
Somewhat
when we
vague.
give money to VHCB, when we give them large chunks of money besides their base, which comes from
it's the property.
50% of the, what?
I believe it's property transfer tax.
After tax. When we give more, this is the language we always use, except recovery residences, farm workers. And there is one more thing I'm gonna propose to be added here.
And this was language that came over from VHCB to me to plug in.
Okay.
I've checked, it has similar language, has been used recently in the past. But yes, if you, Mr. Chair, if you have a request, just let me know.
Okay,
Okay, moving to page 33. This is the funds that are going to Department of Housing and Community Development to be granted out. So I've just had to change the top line number because we have added on line 16, subsection E, 235,000 granted to Home Share Vermont for the purposes of funding case management positions and an intake coordinator. I tried my best to articulate based on the email that was shared with me what they were looking for the funds for. So please understand that I don't know that they have reacted to that in any capacity. So hopefully that can be reviewed by them, and I want to make sure that you all, that is what you're intending the funds to go to.
yes,
Can I be obnoxious for a second and go up to line 5 and 8, so A and B on this page? My understanding was that the FA would prefer
yes,
language like the waterfall language, after the budget. So like more, like, instead of it being 15 million and 15 million, it's granting 30 million to the agency
right.
to, at their discretion now, what
Okay.
And I put in
program.
the memo the draft memo I've prepared, it reduces it to 20 million, but that's something for the committee to discuss. But it's to combine the two middle income programs, rental and housing, into one appropriation of whatever it is. And the reasons they really like the discretion to be able to move back and forth and respond to various market issues. By what, do we go rental? Do we go home ownership, et cetera? So it would be cumulatively, B and C would be one number.
Who has the discretion? Is it the department or is it DHFA?
The
HFA.
The HFA.
So the department is granting them 30 million to use for
Whatever
these
you
two
say it is,
programs.
Those two.
Okay.
Also, that was all.
I just felt bad that I was going back up.
Okay. On 3. Let's just see, 200,000 for the resident, 2 million for resident services,
Yes, so moving to the bottom of this.
100,000, okay, all right. Staff is
We've got-
for all, yeah.
Yeah, so one thing I will comment, just because a potential drafting change came to me, we had discussed it a little bit in committee last time I was here. Under this sub-3, sub-A, so we have 2 million going to implement the resident services program. That was 6 million the last time I was here. It's been reduced to 2.
Right.
There was a question about whether or not we should articulate the service itself in statute. I had a conversation with my colleagues because that program exists. Now, it was not funded, so my understanding is that's why the Agency of Human Services never did anything with it. But the program exists in session law. It was passed last year. So it is more, probably the easiest thing and more appropriate thing to simply appropriate money to that program as opposed to re-articulating the program again. Does that make sense? Okay.
And just for the committee's sake, the first item in my third priority was resident services program, but not funded. established an Act 181 bond fund and includes renewal of that for all. And I made it 2.4 million, so it's both of these in our list of
And
plans.
so there on real quick, the page 34, top sub B, we have 400,000 going to Cathedral Square to support the SAS for All pilot program. I would like to reach out to them, and I intend to today, to just make sure. What I wasn't able to find is, my understanding is that pilot program or SAS in general has been given general funds in the past. I just want to make sure the pilot program isn't in statute and isn't set to, or session law, and isn't set to somehow expire. So there's a little tie down that I need to do on that I would try to do today. I'm just letting you know. The last thing that's in here that was added was this language here. This is on page 34, sub 5. We have 149,500 to the Department of Labor, the grant to the Associate General Contractors for purposes of promoting, expanding training and certificate programs, and then with a report back to you all about the expenditure of those funds. And understanding that may go somewhere else in another bill.
This is your second initiative, right? In other words, remember, we've gotten all this testimony about how constrained we are because we don't have enough labor. We don't have enough contractors, et cetera. So one response is Vermont State colleges, and the other is this one. And I'm going to propose amending the second priority in my letter to have both. And Tom's been working on this, and this is the second of these items. And you know, it may end up being, this may end up being in commerce. It doesn't matter, put it here to begin with.
I'm so sorry, so on line 16 of the page 33, so it's, or not, line 18, so it's the sum of 2.6.
Where are you?
I'm on
that's
page 33,
that's a typo.
so okay, so we're gonna make section A line 20 and B line,
It should
they
be,
should add up to,
it should be
A
this.
and B should add up to whatever the sum is gonna be stated on line 3.
2.4. I had what I had was, I
Sorry.
had the 235
Yep.
under this section, and then I realized it needed to go up here, and I just need to update that final number. So that is a
So
typo.
it is gonna add up, A
Yes.
and B will add up to
Yes.
2.4, okay, thank you.
Okay, that's it, huh?
Those are the changes that I've made since your last draft. Related to my section and your appropriations.
So let's talk just a little bit about what we're going to do next. First of all, I'm going to do everything I can such that, let me get up again our schedule.
It's a little.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's called Associated General Contractors and not the Associate. General.
I think you're right.
I think it is a.
It's AGC.
AGC, the Vermont chapter of AGC, but. Check out.
Today, please come back from lunch. I would say at 5:01, because we have to go over the letter, and then we're going to try to act on the H57. Even though I said earlier that we would try it tomorrow, Mary is not going to be here tomorrow. Mary cares deeply about this, and the chair, in the exercise of my discretion, I'm taking responsibility for saying that in light of all of that, that we're going to vote on this afternoon. We may not finish the discussion by 1 p.m., but then we'll just have to convene after House floor and finish it. But I think we're going to vote on this. And if it means, it means what it means. We're going to just prove it. Also, we're going to have one piece of testimony at 2:00, resident services. And that will support one of these appropriations. And then Ellen is coming back at 2:30. Okay. We have to move on Thursday and Friday. we really have to move into just marking up, going through section by section and marking these up. I'll do everything I can, working with you, Cameron, the rest of today, this evening, whatever, just making sure that I get to you any stray last things. Also, I am meeting with the speaker at 3 o'clock today, or 3:30, can't remember which. And 3:15, I think. I don't remember what it is, but I hope by the end of the day to know which of these things we can take on and which we can't. And I imagine some of the material may come out of this because there won't be the time or the ability in some cases to get the sign off from other committees. For instance, housing, so it's, I just want to confess to my own frustration. Housing is multidisciplinary and the structure of the legislature means therefore many committees. And we're just living with that system. Yes, Joe.
In your meeting that I won't be at.
Which meeting? We're meeting with the speaker?
Correct.
Yeah.
I would highly ask that you push for the amending appeals to the environmental division and that it go to judiciary if we do.
Judiciary told me well, he was kind of unclear, but he pretty much said he didn't think it had to go to.
Well, I mean, all we're amending is a judicial process.
I know,
Doesn't matter what court it's in,
Yeah.
all we're doing is amending a judicial process.
I know. But okay, it's,
And if
We
it
can
should
do
go
that.
somewhere,
yeah.
that's where it should go.
And I will convey your opinion directly.
Yeah.
And you should know, it has been my position that we should take on appeals. And I have conveyed that and I will convey it forcefully. And if anyone would like to speak to the speaker about that or connect with her, be my guest.
I guess your conversation is going to hold more weight than mine, so. It hasn't gotten me anywhere yet.
I have gone out on a limb and suggested that we have bipartisan support for this idea. So
Indeed, we do.
is there anything else we need to do before lunch? Lord, forbid that we early, but. Members of the committee, last questions, thoughts before we do this?
We're not really ending early if we have to come back early.
Yeah, I would get back here. I would get back here in an hour.